All right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's talk about the Middle East. The AP with this. The U.S. military has stopped another merchant vessel trying to break through the American blockade of Iranian ports. It's according to a U.S. official with knowledge of the situation. Again, speaking with the AP. They say that the Gambia-flagged bulk carrier ignored multiple warnings from U.S. forces overnight as it tried to enter an Iranian port. Let's bring in retired Marine Intelligence Officer, national security analyst, and the host of the Strap podcast, Hal Kempfer. Hal, this is the sixth time that the U.S. has stopped a ship trying to breach the blockade. The ship was disabled by U.S. aircraft in the Gulf of Oman. Do we know why ships typically try to breach the blockade?
Typically because they're ordered to. The Iranians want to see if they can get through. You know, there are probably some ships that are getting through. As much as we tout the fact that we have, deterred or turned back 116 ships, there's absolute, there's been reporting that ships are getting in and out of these ports. Not a lot, but some do. It's not an ironclad blockade. So they're basically trying to do it. They're testing the system to see if maybe there's some leeway there where they can get through. And in this case, they were warned 20 times. They ignored those warnings, and a very precise shot aviation launched of a Hellfire missile went into the engine compartment, disabled the ship. It's currently adrift in the Gulf of Oman. Didn't set the ship on fire, didn't sink the ship. And I will tell you, when you're targeting ships with ordnance, these are all major considerations if you're just trying to disable it. I have to say, some of the gunnery, some of the precise hits that we've had on these ships disabling fire has been very, very impressive. I can think of a number of countries throughout the world who are not that precise and would end up sinking the ship or setting it ablaze instead of disabling it.
So U.S. forces didn't board the ship?
No, we did not board the ship. And there's no need to, as far as I can tell. The ship's adrift. I mean, at some point, if we need to render aid to the ship because it's a threat to shipping or some other reason, that we could. But anytime you do what's VBSS, vessel boarding search seizure, when you go into a vessel and do something like that, it's a risky operation. And I think if you don't have to do it, then don't do it.
Yeah. CENTCOM saying this: U.S. forces continue to enforce the blockade against Iran. As of May 29th, commercial vessels have been redirected to ensure no commerce enters or leaves Iranian ports. If we look at the big picture, Hal, does it seem like the blockade has had the intended effect?
Austin, one of the things that we see the economic impact of the Straits closure on the U.S. economy, on U.S. gas prices, on the global economy. Secretary Hegseth in Asia, talking to our Asian allies who've been really hit by the Strait closure. So we see that very apparent. What we don't see, because of the virtual blackout of news coming out of Iran, is the economic impact this has had in Iran. To say the economy is now flatlined would probably be an understatement. I think they can push along for some more months, but there's talk about sometime in midsummer, if nothing was to change, that their economy would, I don't know what collapse actually looks like in an Iranian sense, but that their economy would hit a point where it's so desperate that the government would pretty much start to lose control completely. So they are under tremendous pressure. The regime is, even the Revolutionary Guard Corps, those hardcore ideologues, General Vahidi, they're all under pressure to come to some sort of terms in order to get things going again.
So you and I, we were talking offline. There was this interesting reporting that came from the Wall Street Journal. They say the United Arab Emirates carried out dozens of airstrikes against Iran beginning in the early days of the war, and it continued through the day after the April ceasefire was announced. With this in mind, Hal, how would you describe the UAE's role in the conflict?
Well, this certainly explains some of the Iranian targeting of the UAE. They seem to be putting a lot of drones and a lot of missiles that direction. And now it becomes more clear why they were doing that. The UAE has very capable Air Force, Air Forces, and they buy their aircraft from the U.S. Very very deep relationship we have with them in terms of arming UAE military forces. And so they conducted these strikes in a variety of interesting places, particularly some of the islands in the Persian Gulf and the Strait. One of which, Abu Musa, which has been an island under contention for many decades, is one of three islands that the UAE claims as sovereign territory that the Shah of Iran back in '71 basically took over and has maintained control. That was one of the islands that they were targeting. I found that rather interesting. Also, some of the other targets going after refineries and stuff. And then, depending on the timing, some of this could have been retaliation for what the Iranians did. But the UAE took a much more aggressive role than was earlier reported.
I'm curious, we might not even know the answer to this question, but would the Iranians have known that those missiles were coming from the UAE and not from some sort of hardware that was U.S. or Israeli based?
I'm assuming they would have figured that out. They're watching the Persian Gulf pretty closely. They're looking at where everything's coming from, and we're not. I don't believe we were launching aircraft. We may have been, but I don't know if we were launching aircraft from the UAE going towards going to Iran. But they may have been looking at this, and then of course you have to remember Iran has intelligence assets around the region. So they could have been reporting that UAE aircraft were launching strikes or there were some other weapon systems being used in the UAE. So I'm going to assume they probably figured this out over time.
Hal Kempfer with us. We are going to step away for a quick commercial break. There's a lot more to discuss in the world. One of the other top international headlines has been Cuba. Hal and I are going to discuss the island nation when we return in a moment. We'll be right back.